So wide receiver is the last position group that we need to talk about,
Yeah.
Brian. On the
Yeah, and you know
offensive
what,
side.
Vince? Can I call a little bit of an audible? Because I'm
No.
enjoying this conversation, and I really want to not rush the defensive one.
Okay.
Let's just talk offense today,
Oh, okay.
right? Let's
Yeah, we
just
do
kind of
defense
continue
tomorrow.
focusing the offense because
I was
otherwise,
getting nervous as I was looking at the
right,
clock, so I like this.
because I do want to focus on this stuff because I want to talk about some things that I think they need
Let's
to
do
do
that.
offensively to get to that level. But when we talk about wide receiver right now, they're not there yet. There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
I agree.
And this is the position I would argue they're furthest away, but it's not because of the talent. I think the depth is a problem, and I think that this group has been so poorly coached that it may take
It's not going to be overnight.
a little bit of time to do it. I think that's the key for me.
It's not going to be overnight, but at the same time, there are little things that you can do in practice, whether it's drill work, whether it's in the film room, or whatever the case may be, where I think you're going to see a noticeable difference from this group.
Oh, sure. And I think it can be fixed by 2022 season. This isn't a thing where it's like, well, it's going to take to 2023. No. It's just what I'm saying is there's a lot more work that needs to be done here than at some other places. And I'd say that's why I'm not ready to go there yet with the offensive line, because there's some deprogramming that Harry Hiestan's going to have to do.
Yes.
Right? There's some like for Tommy Rees and the quarterbacks, it's just about, hey, you got the talent. You've been doing some good things, coach. Now just take it to that next step. Same thing with the tight end. It's already there. Running back, Lance Taylor's done a phenomenal coaching job, in my opinion.
Agreed.
It's just I think he needs to recruit a little bit better. But I think he's an excellent position coach. I really do. I think that schematically there's some things they need to do differently to use different backs in different ways and not just kind of plug them all into the same run game. But they're really close there. With running back or with O-line and receiver, why I'm a little more hesitant than you are at the O-line and why we're both hesitant at the receiver is you got to tear stuff down first before you can build it back up. And I'm not talking about tearing down the players, like getting on them. I'm talking about like, hey, everything you learned before, forget all that crap. And we're starting over with. Like,
forget it.
If I'm Harry Hiestand or Jamarcus Shepard, I'm saying that the one thing I never want to hear come out of any of your mouths is, well, the way we used to do it, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
There's a reason I'm here and that guy's not. Okay. You don't say it quite like that because you respect people that you respect people in the profession more than that. But you say, like, I don't want to hear anything about the way you did it. I've been brought here to make you a championship unit. And here's the way I'm going to do it. And we're going to do it my way. And your first spring is going to be about not just teaching the way you do it, but you got to figure out, you got to drill it in a way that you're deprogramming some of the things that you see on film that were problems, right? And so that's the challenge that I think Coach Hiestand and whoever the receivers coach is, and we've talked about who we think it's going to be.
Sure.
But that's the challenge that they have, Vince, is that you've got to deprogram some stuff first. Absolutely. And I don't know how long that's going to take. Now, here's the good news. This is going to be a relatively young group of receivers the next 2 years. And some of the guys, I mean, you're going to lean a lot more on Deion Colzie and Tobias Merriweather and Lorenzo Styles next year than you maybe otherwise would have. That means there's less deprogramming with those guys. Number one, you don't have to deprogram Tobias Merriweather at all. Tobias Merriweather's already a better route runner than all but maybe two guys on Notre Dame's roster right now because of what he learned in high school. So he's going to come in and he's going to be a bit of a blank slate from a coaching standpoint at college. Deion Colzie didn't get coached a ton this year. Lorenzo Styles is kind of already pretty well coached, I think, coming into high school or coming into college. But even then, there's less deprogramming you have to do with those guys. And I think that's going to help. But like with Braden Lindsey, there's a lot of bad habits that Braden Lindsey's developed that you're going to have to beat out of him. When I say beat out, I'm referring to drill work. It's about beat out of him. It's a figure of speech.
Taking him out back.
Yeah, you don't like throw a baseball bat at the back of his head every time he runs a route wrong. It's not what I'm talking about. It's just an expression, right?
Oh,
you have to beat that out of him, and that may take a little bit more time.
Yeah,
and so same with like Joe Wilkins. He's got some bad habits when it comes to route running and catching the ball that he learned from the previous coach that you kind of got to beat out of him a little bit. And so to me, the how long that takes is going to determine how quickly this receiving core gets going. But I think the talent is there. I think that they just need more of it.
Yeah,
is the key.
Yeah,
they need
absolutely.
more of it.
The depth worries me. I think the frontline guys can compete with just about anybody, and I like that. Again,
talent, potential wise.
Exactly. The caveat is if they're going to get coached properly. That's always the caveat here. But from a talent standpoint, I think that they can compete with anybody. But I have them as a not close to close. Like before, I was like they're close and almost to championship level. The wide receivers are not close, but they're almost to close. Like that's where I've got the wide receivers. I think they can get there, but man, this is the on the offensive side for me. This is where the most proof needs to be shown to me, right? I mean, it's where I'm going to need to see it the most, and a lot of it has to do with also how they're going to be utilized. Again, we talked about Chris Tyree being utilized in a certain way from a running back position. Well, the same thing goes for Braden Lenzy. I mean, he's not. You can't just line him up like you did Chase Claypool and expect the same, or Will Fuller, for example, and expect the same. You got to be creative with Braden Lenzy. And I think they touched on that. They started to go there in the Fiesta Bowl, but with a whole offseason.
And I would say they kind of started doing it later in the year, too. Saw it against Stanford a little bit, you know, where they did some things. And
that's what I want to see. And again, that goes back to the coaching part and Tommy Rees and the fact that I'm very confident in what he can do, but we need to see it. And so if Tommy Rees brings his A game and he gets to a championship level, that's going to upgrade a lot of these positions, right? It's going to upgrade
because the supporting cast now, I think, from a coaching standpoint, is there.
Yes,
that's a big key for me. And now it's about you've had some really good receiver classes, but you've got to get rid of the inconsistency where one year it's great and the next year you don't have anybody left from the position group, you know. And we've seen too much of that. You know, 18 was a really good receiver class, but 17 and 19 were not. You don't have anybody left from the 19 roster, the 19 receiving core at receiver. You don't have anybody left from the 2020 receiver class at receiver. You can't have those anymore. You can't have, you know, Tobias Merriweather might be the most physically gifted receiver on the roster, but he's the only guy in a year where you needed at least three. Like those are the things you've got to fix as the receivers coach, right? But they've been able to get talented players. It's just those guys haven't been coached up. And that's what I'm excited to see.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, we just saw a guy that with, you know, Jamarcus Shepard, for example, if he is the guy, he just, you know, he had David Bell, who's had a great season. I wouldn't say that David Bell's more physically talented than Kevin Austin. I wouldn't say that at all.
No, I wouldn't either.
He's a talented kid, but he's not as big as Kevin Austin. I don't think he's as fast as Kevin Austin. He's just a better wide receiver than Kevin Austin because he knows how to play the game. And after that's like Milton Wright and Jackson Anthrop and guys like that are who they are having a top 5 pass offense with, you know, and I had somebody say, well, yeah, they had to throw the ball because they couldn't run it. I'm like, yeah, that adds even more. Adds even more to how good their pass offense was because they didn't have elite players. They didn't have a great O-line. They had a walk-on quarterback.
Yeah.
And everybody knew they had to throw it, and they still threw the ball and had some big-time games. And so, you know, I mean, and a lot of it was because those receivers know how to play the game, and Jeff Brom's a really smart guy. And here's the interesting thing about Jamarcus Shepard. If they're able to land him, the one thing I said, if you remember when Notre Dame was getting ready to play Purdue, I said if Tommy Rees wants to sort of follow coaches, you know, instead of the NFL guys like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, because NFL and college are different ball games to a degree. Jeff Brom is a guy at the collegiate level he needs to follow and kind of look up to because he does he's a pro style coach that knows how to throw the football. And I think the fact that Notre Dame is going to be able to get somebody from that staff if they get Jamarcus Shepard, to me, is huge because he's not just going to help you from how to teach receivers, but he's just going to have another way of looking at things. And the other thing about Jamarcus Shepard, too, is he's coached under Jeff Brom, Mike Leach, and Bobby Petrino in his career. That's 3 great offensive minds. So he's had time in an air raid offense, which is just for 1 year at Washington State. but he's had a lot of time under Petrino and Brom because he was with Brom at Western Kentucky as well. And some of the numbers that his receivers put up at Western Kentucky were just stupid. He had like 1 year where like 4 different guys had over 800 yards receiving. It's just stupid. And, to me, that Vince is also going to bring something to it because he is a pro-style coach.
Sure.
So that it's going to be the transition is going to be easy and smooth.
Yeah, somebody said that Tommy Rees wants to be an air raid coach. No,
he does not. Tommy Rees wants to be a pro-style NFL coach. Yeah,
and he threw the ball in the Fiesta Bowl because he had to.
And throwing doesn't equal air raid.
It's also very true. Yes, but that's what people are. 500 yards. They want to be an air raid. No,
that doesn't make air raid is a style of system. I mean, you look at Purdue this year. Purdue. Okay, so if you look at the top 5 passing teams in the country this year, Western Kentucky, Virginia, Ohio State, Mississippi State, and Purdue. I don't know what Western Kentucky's offense is. I don't know if they're air raid or not. Virginia's not an air raid offense. Ohio State's not an air raid offense, and Purdue's not an air raid offense. Ohio State and Purdue are very pro-style spread, is what they are. And that's what Tommy Rees is. He's a pro-style spread coach.
Yep.
And so they're not an air raid offense. He doesn't want to be an air raid coach. RPOs aren't an air raid only offense. Steve Sarkisian uses them. Lane Kiffin uses them. They're also pro-style spread coaches. So that's what Tommy Rees wants to be, and that's been Jamarcus Shepard's entire background outside of 1 year with Mike Leach. So that is incorrect. But I just, when I look at it, Vince, to me, receiver is a lot closer than it needs to be in our opinion. I'll say this. I feel like a lot of the things we criticize, you and I criticize Brian Kelly over the last couple of years, we've been vindicated to a degree. Now we're going to find out if we're going to be vindicated on our opinion of the talent level at Notre Dame, especially on offense.
Sure.
Because if we are correct and the talent is better than people realize, then this thing is going to get turned around real fast on offense. And we started to see it a little bit this year.
Yep.
And that to me is going to be a thing of, and if they're not able to get this going, either A, Tommy Rees isn't who we think he is, and I do think he is, or B, the talent level isn't what we thought it was. And that's what we're going to find out. We're going to find out if Tyler Buckner's and Drew Piner as good as we think they are, if the running backs are as good as we think they are, if the O-line talent is as good as we think it is, and if the receiver talent's as good as we think it is. The one area where no one questions is tight end. I mean, nobody questions
right.
that.
No.
But I do think it's fair to question, for people to question us on, is the talent really as good as you say it is? Because look at the results. And that's fair. That's very fair. And I'm not going to tell people they're necessarily wrong. It's just, we're going to find out now. We're going to find out now if the talent is in fact where it needs to be. And what I would do is, I would hire Jamarcus Shepard if you can, and we believe Notre Dame will.
Right.
I would do that, and I would sit down and have a heart-to-heart with Xavier Watts and say, look, man, we want you back. And we're going to bring you back, and you're going to play. You're going to get the ball, right? Because you've got to make – it's not about competing. You got to make that kid some promises.
Yeah.
Because he knows he's going to play at safety.
Because he's been made promises before by a previous coach, and they weren't followed through on, and that's why he moved to defense.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest about that. So you're dealing with some trust issues.
Yeah. And to me, the reason I say to move him is because, number one, I think receiver still his best position. I think the depth at safety now is okay without him, now that you've got Brandon Joseph and Ramon Henderson, and you're bringing back DJ Brown and Houston Griffith. And to me, I think a combination of Ramon and Brandon Joseph as your starters has a chance to be really good. And yes, Xavier would make it even better. Xavier's going to make wherever he plays better.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just a fact.
You said it the other day that if Xavier Watts is playing defense, it's going to kind of be a 3-man.
Oh yeah,
kind of a rotation, similar to what they did when Kyle Hamilton was a freshman.
Correct.
It'd be similar to that, right?
Correct.
And you're going to be very good there. There's no question about it. But if he goes over to offense, he's also going to be in the rotation, and he makes that group that much deeper and that much better, because he is going to play. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter, but he could be, depending on what formation they come out in. Depending on how things go. Somebody in the chat asked what position offensively that he plays. Do you want to cover that real quick so
Xavier?
people understand? Yeah.
He's played all over. He's played slot,
exactly.
X, and W.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's part of the value that he brings to the table. He can play slot. I think that a four-man kind of rotation of Xavier, Styles, Lindsey, and Avery Davis is going to be big because I don't think Avery Davis and Lindsey are guys that are going to be able to play 50-plus snaps a game. Even if Avery Davis comes back, he's going to be coming off a torn ACL. I don't know if you're going to want to play him 50, 60 snaps a game again. And I think Xavier can do some things where you can kind of go fast, go with your faster group, your lightning group. That's what we would call it. Is we had when I was at different places where I was the pass game coordinator, we had what we called our lightning group. And it was, we'd put some faster guys in the field.
Yeah.
And even some guys were out of position a little bit. But that's something I think they can do with Xavier. But he brings a after the catch dynamic they don't have a lot of. Because Braden Lindsey can do things after the catch with pure speed, but Braden Lindsey's never been a guy that's like juking people, and I don't care. You don't need to ask him to do that. Xavier can do that. I think Lorenzo Styles can do that to a degree, but Xavier brings it more than anybody else would have it, and I think you need that element, in my opinion. And that's I think Xavier could still be a really good player. And then you're going to lose Lindsey and Avery Davis after next year, and Avery and Xavier would step into an even bigger role at that point in time.
Correct.
And so I think you move Xavier Watts back, and you've got Tobias coming up, Dion, Lorenzo Styles, Avery Davis, Braden Lindsey. You got a chance to have a really – and Jaden Thomas is a guy that had a really strong finish to the year in practice. All of a sudden, you're looking at a really good receiver situation. You got a veteran like Joe Wilkins who's a solid player, provides leadership, character, all that kind of stuff. If Jamarcus Shepard's the coach we think he is, and if he's the guy, and again, I expect him to be, then I think this group can get going pretty quickly.
It alleviates some of my fears at wide receiver, just from a depth standpoint, from a production standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, all of those different things. It alleviates a lot of that if Xavier Watts, heads over to offense.
And really land at least one high school, because I think they're going to get at least one high school kid in February.
Okay.
But if you get a high school kid and then you get Xavier Watts over there, and all of a sudden the depth issues aren't a problem anymore.
Right.
And you've still got Matt Salerno, I believe, has another year of eligibility left as well. So all of a sudden now you're fine there. You're fine. And you're only going to lose, 2-3 guys after the season. And now you start replacing them with
now
the next group of recruits
with the reload situation. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.